This place is lovely.
I knew you'd like it. Have you decided what you want?
I feel so free! This is amazing! Let's spin together! Yeah, let's go!
You think I don't see what you're doing? How could you? I can't believe this. I can't. Look at me.
Nobody told Amanda that the city could change you twice. The first time felt like becoming the new clothes, the confidence, the girl in the mirror who finally looked like someone worth knowing. The second time felt like disappearing. Both changes came quietly. Only one of them asked permission. Amanda had grown up where the morning smelled of wood smoke and warm porridge, where the nearest neighbor was a 10-minute walk through fields of sorghum, and where the biggest event of the week was Sunday church and the singing that followed it. Her village, Rushiha, sat quietly in a valley ringed by green hills, and she had known its every path, every face, every season since she could remember. Her mother wore the same floral wrap skirt she had owned for 15 years, and her father still repaired shoes under the old avocado tree by the road. Life in Rushiha was predictable, unhurried and honest. A life that had been handed down from one generation to the next like a carefully folded cloth. Amanda had worn that life like a second skin, without ever questioning whether it fit her or not. She had loved it in the way you love something you have never known the absence of. But all of that was about to change the morning she packed a single blue bag and boarded the bus that would carry her away from the red soil roads and into the city of Kigali, where she had been accepted into a college program in business administration. Her mother had pressed a rosary into her palm at the bus stop and told her to be careful of the city people, that they looked beautiful on the outside, but sometimes carried empty hearts. Amanda had nodded and smiled and told her mother not to worry. But as the bus curved around the last hill and Rushiha disappeared from the window, she felt the first tremor of something new move through her chest. Not quite fear, not quite excitement, but something that lived exactly between the two. The city announced itself loudly, in the way cities always do, with noise and light and motion that overwhelmed the senses all at once. Kigali was nothing like anything Amanda had imagined from the photographs she had seen in old magazines. The streets were wide and clean, lined with flowering trees and buzzing with motorbike taxis that wove between cars with startling confidence. Tall buildings caught the afternoon sun and threw it back at her in blinding flashes. The hostel where she had been assigned a room was a 3-story concrete block near the college, and she shared her room with 2 other girls, Nadia and Priya, who were both from the city and carried themselves with an ease that Amanda could not yet name but immediately wanted. On her first night, she sat on her narrow bed and listened to the city hum outside the window, sounds that never fully stopped even after midnight, and felt the sheer weight of how far she was from everything she had known. She unpacked her blue bag slowly, arranging her few belongings on the narrow shelf above the bed. 2 neatly folded dresses, a Bible, a small photo of her family standing in front of their house, squinting into the sun. It was Nadia who knocked on her side of the room first, leaning her head through the doorway with bright lipstick and easy eyes, asking if Amanda wanted to come and share their supper. Amanda had said yes before she even thought about it. That simple yes was the first door she opened, and through it came everything that followed. Nadia and Priya were the kind of girls Amanda had only seen in the pages of magazines that her cousins sometimes brought back from the city. Polished and knowing, full of opinions on music and fashion and the right way to walk into a room. They were not unkind. In fact, they were warm and funny and curious about Amanda in a way that made her feel seen rather than judged. But they were also a mirror, and in that mirror, Amanda began to notice all the ways she had never thought about herself before. They noticed her clothes first. Not cruelly, but with the natural honesty that close girls share. And Nadia took her to the market one Saturday and helped her pick out a few pieces that were, as Nadia said, more you than you know. Amanda looked at herself in the narrow mirror propped against the market store wall and barely recognized the person looking back. The dress was fitted and bright, the kind of thing she would never have reached for alone. But she looked beautiful. She knew it immediately and with a clarity that surprised her. Priya did her eyebrows that evening and taught her the way to walk with her shoulders back and her chin just slightly lifted. Not out of pride, they said, but out of self-possession. These were small things, surface things, but they cracked something open in Amanda that went far deeper than fabric and makeup. She was beginning to understand that the girl from Rushiha was not all that she was, that she contained more rooms than she had been shown.
By the time the first semester settled into its rhythm, Amanda had changed in ways she could not have fully explained to her mother, though she tried in the letters she wrote every 2 weeks. She studied hard. That had never changed, and her professors noted her focus and the quality of her written work. But outside the classroom, she had discovered a version of herself that felt freer, louder, more present. She and Nadia and Priya went to the campus social events on Friday evenings, where she learned to dance without apologizing for taking up space. She learned to give opinions in conversation without softening them into questions. She started a small savings account with her scholarship stipend and stopped sending half of it home without asking herself what she needed first. Her friends called it glowing up, and they said it with admiration. She wore her hair out and her clothes fitted and walked through the college corridors with the kind of quiet confidence that made people notice without her having to try. Other girls in her course began to draw closer to her, asking where she got her outfits, admiring her posture, asking her to sit with them at lunch. Amanda, who had spent her whole childhood on the edges of things, found herself suddenly at the center, and it felt extraordinary. She did not forget Rushiha. She carried it always, the way you carry the place where your bones were formed. But for the first time in her life, she was not trying to shrink herself into anyone else's shape. She was becoming, and it was magnificent, and she thought it would last forever.
He appeared at the edge of a Friday evening gathering in the second year, standing with his friends by the campus fountain with a confident stillness that was different from the restless energy of the college boys Amanda had grown used to. His name was Daniel, and he was older. Not a student, but a man who worked in finance and moved through the world with a certainty that felt to Amanda like something worth leaning against. He was handsome in a deliberate way, well-dressed, and when he crossed the courtyard to speak to her, he did not stumble over himself the way younger men did. He asked her questions that were not about her appearance at first, but about her ideas, what she was studying, where she came from, what she wanted from her life. Amanda, who had learned to guard herself from the easy flattery of campus boys, found herself disarmed by the quality of his attention. He listened in a way that made her feel that every sentence she said was worth keeping. She told Nadia about him that night, and Nadia raised her eyebrows and said to be careful, that older men with too much money and too much interest were sometimes carrying something they did not advertise. Amanda had laughed and told her she was being paranoid. She was 20 years old and shining and felt entirely capable of handling anything a man could bring her way. She had no reason, then, to think that love could take something from you instead of giving you more. They dated through the second half of her second year, and in the beginning, it was everything she might have written in a journal as a girl back in Rushiha. The restaurants she had never been inside, the conversations that stretched long into the night, the feeling of being chosen by someone who seemed to have everything and still wanted her. Daniel was generous with gifts and time and words, and Amanda allowed herself to be swept along by the current of it, telling herself that this was what she had come to the city for,
to grow into something larger than the life she had been born into. But changes came quietly, the way trouble usually does. He began making small comments about her friends, wondering aloud whether Nadia was a good influence, suggesting that Priya's lifestyle was too loose for a serious girl. At first, Amanda dismissed it, but the comments accumulated until she found herself making excuses not to go out with her friends, choosing Daniel's company over theirs because it was easier than defending herself against his disappointment. He did not shout in those early days. He used silence and withdrawal instead, a coldness that lasted a day or two whenever she did something he did not approve of. And Amanda, who had learned to read rooms since childhood, quickly learned to do whatever she needed to do to keep the warmth in his eyes directed at her. She did not name what was happening. She called it love. She called it adjustment. She did not yet understand that she had begun the slow process of making herself smaller again. Not smaller in the way her village had made her, but smaller in the way a person becomes when someone else decides what shape they are allowed to take. The abuse did not come all at once. It never does. It arrived in stages, each one normalized by the one before, so that by the time it became something Amanda could not explain away, she had already constructed a life that kept her isolated from the people who would have seen it clearly. Daniel's cold silences had become sharp words, and the sharp words had become accusations. And one evening in the small apartment he had begun asking her to spend most of her time in, the accusations became something physical. A grip on her wrist that lasted too long. A shove against the wall that left her stunned and silent and ashamed, looking at the floor while he stood over her and told her she had made him do it. That if she were not so stubborn, so careless, so self-centered, he would not need to be this way. Amanda did not cry in front of him. She learned not to, because crying made it worse. She cried later, alone, into the corner of a pillow. And then she washed her face and went back out into the room because she did not know what else to do. She had stopped talking to Nadia and Priya nearly entirely by this point. She had stopped calling home as often. She had stopped wearing the fitted bright dresses that had made her feel herself because Daniel preferred her in certain colors, certain lengths, certain levels of invisibility. The girl who had walked down college corridors with her shoulders back and her chin lifted was still inside her, she knew. She could feel her pressing against the walls of herself, trying to find a way out. But the walls had thickened, and for a time, she did not know how she would break them down again. It was a Thursday afternoon in late March when something shifted. She had come back to the hostel to collect a textbook she had left behind. She still maintained her enrollment, still attended her classes, still submitted her work, because education was the one thing Daniel had not been able to reach. And she found Priya sitting in the corridor outside her old room, as if she had simply been waiting there. Priya did not ask where Amanda had been or why she had gone quiet. She looked at Amanda's face for a long moment, at the way she stood with her shoulders folded inward, at the shadow of something old and tired living behind her eyes. And she simply said, "Come inside. I will make you tea." And Amanda, who had been holding herself rigid for months, who had forgotten what it felt like to be in a room without the threat of disapproval, sat down at the small plastic table in that familiar room and began to cry in a way she had not allowed herself to cry since the whole thing began. She cried until there was nothing left of it, and Priya sat with her without asking her to stop, without making her explain herself before she was ready. When Amanda finally spoke, the words came out slowly, like water moving through cracked earth. And what came out was the whole truth of the past months, all of it, without softening any edge. Priya listened, and then Nadia came in, and she listened too. And together, the three of them sat in the gathering dusk and began to talk about what came next. It would not be simple. There was no neat ending waiting for Amanda on the other side of this. There was only the beginning of a decision. The same girl who had packed a blue bag in Rushiha and boarded a bus towards something unknown was still there. And she was learning, slowly and painfully, that the hardest journey she would ever make was not the one away from home, but the one back to herself.